August 15, 1945. The war was over. Across the world, radios crackled with the same message. Japan had surrendered. After years of brutal conflict, the deadliest war in human history had finally come to an end. In cities, in trenches, on ships, and in airfields, men began to celebrate. Some wept. Others simply stood in silence, unable to comprehend that the fighting had stopped. But high above the Pacific, over the skies near Tokyo, a group of American pilots had not yet heard the full weight of that announcement. Lieutenant Howard "Howdy" Harrison led a formation of 6 F-6F Hellcats on a routine fighter sweep. Their mission was simple: patrol and strike enemy positions around the Atsugi airfield, one of the last operational Japanese bases near the capital. It was supposed to be another mission in a long war, a war they believed still raged. Below them, the coastline of Japan stretched into the distance. The air was calm, almost deceptively peaceful. Then Harrison spotted it, the airfield. "Target in sight," he called over the radio. "Arm HVARs, boys." The pilots responded instantly. Rockets were armed. Engines roared as the Hellcats angled downward into attack position. Harrison tightened his grip on the controls as the target rushed toward him. His finger hovered over the release. Then, without warning, the radio burst to life. "Return to base immediately. The war is over. I repeat, the war is over." For a moment, there was silence. Then the realization hit. Cheers erupted across the radio channel. "Hell yeah, we did it! V for victory!" The formation broke from its attack. Instead of diving into combat, the Hellcats climbed away, their pilots laughing, shouting, and celebrating. Some rolled their aircraft through the sky in spontaneous victory maneuvers, the tension of years suddenly released in seconds. The war was over. They were going home. But behind them, the sky was not yet at peace. Japanese fighters had already been airborne, patrolling the same airspace. Among them was Navy Lieutenant Yutaka Morioka. As he watched the American aircraft turn away, celebrating instead of attacking, a cold realization settled over him. Something had changed, something unthinkable. Then his radio confirmed it. "Return to base. The Emperor commands it. Cease fighting." Japan had surrendered. For many, that order meant relief. For others, it meant humiliation. Morioka felt neither peace nor relief. He felt only the weight of defeat and the memory of everything lost. His hand, injured in earlier combat, throbbed with phantom pain. Around him, some army pilots began to turn back, obeying the Emperor's command. But Morioka made a different choice. This, he believed, was his final chance. With a sudden surge of resolve, he pushed his aircraft into a steep dive. "Long live the Emperor!" His wingman followed. Then others joined. What began as hesitation became action, a final strike. Ahead, the American pilots were still celebrating, unaware that the war, for them, was not yet finished. "Bandits! 6 o'clock high!" The warning shattered the moment. Harrison glanced over his shoulder and saw them, Japanese fighters diving out of the sun with a clear advantage. "Dump your tanks and rockets," he ordered. "They're breaking the ceasefire." The Hellcats immediately shed their external loads, becoming lighter and more maneuverable. Harrison shoved his throttle forward and pulled his squadron into a climb, turning to meet the attackers head-on. The two forces closed the distance at terrifying speed. Japanese aircraft, armed with powerful 20mm cannons, opened fire first. Tracers tore through the sky, but Harrison knew their weakness. Their armor was thin, dangerously so. "Open up!" 6 American fighters unleashed a storm of .50 caliber fire. For a split second, the formations passed through each other in a violent exchange of bullets and cannon shells. Then the sky exploded into chaos. Dogfights erupted in every direction. Harrison found himself locked in combat with a pursuing fighter. The two aircraft spiraled downward, each trying to gain the upper hand. He waited, watching his instruments, judging speed and altitude. Then, in a sudden maneuver, he pulled sharply upward, forcing his opponent to follow. The Japanese fighter climbed after him, but too aggressively. It stalled. Harrison seized the moment. "Got you." He rolled over and fired. Streams of bullets tore through the enemy aircraft. Flames erupted as fuel ignited. The aircraft flipped and fell, trailing smoke into the sea below. But there was no time to celebrate. "Boss, I can't shake him!" Harrison turned towards the voice, his wingman, Ensign Billy Hobbs, struggling to evade a relentless attacker. Harrison dove into the fight, lining up his shot carefully. The enemy never saw him. He fired. The Japanese plane exploded instantly. "Thanks, boss. I thought I was done," Hobbs replied, breathing heavily. "Stay sharp," Harrison answered. "We're not out yet." Across the sky, other battles raged. American pilots fought desperately against superior numbers. One by one, aircraft were hit, damaged, or destroyed. Lieutenant Joseph Soloff's plane took heavy fire. His wingman was struck and went down in flames. Soloff fought to keep control, his aircraft barely responding. "Bail out!" Moments later, his parachute opened low over the sea. Elsewhere, Harrison tried to lead survivors away from the chaos, but Morioka was still hunting. The Japanese ace dove again, catching Harrison off guard. Cannon fire slammed into the Hellcat. The aircraft shook violently. "I'm hit bad! Break off!" But Hobbs refused to leave. He turned back, attacking Morioka in a desperate attempt to save his leader. His shots went wide. Morioka stayed focused, closing in. Another burst of cannon fire struck true. Harrison's aircraft exploded in midair. "Harrison!" Hobbs shouted, rage overtaking him. He pursued Morioka, firing wildly. But in his anger, he made a fatal mistake. He didn't check his rear. Morioka's wingman slipped in behind him, unnoticed. Gunfire tore into Hobbs' aircraft. Flames engulfed the cockpit. Wounded and barely conscious, Hobbs managed to open his canopy and jump. His parachute deployed, but he had already lost too much blood. He died before reaching the ground. Gradually, the battle began to fade. Survivors disengaged, heading back towards their carriers or airfields. Lieutenant Ted Hansen emerged from the clouds, alone. "Anyone? Harrison? Proctor?" No answer. Then, faintly, a voice. "Hansen, damaged, carrier." Hope returned. Hansen guided his aircraft towards the USS Yorktown. He landed and climbed out, scanning the horizon. At first, nothing. Then, in the distance, a single aircraft. It was Proctor. Damaged, barely flying, but alive. He landed successfully. They were the only two to return. The last dogfight of the Second World War had ended. On that day, when peace had already been declared, 4 American pilots and 9 Japanese pilots were lost in the sky above Japan. The war had officially ended, but for those men, in those final minutes, it had never truly stopped.